Group Chief Executive Officer NNPC Mele Kyari has denied oil a blending plant in Malta. He also states that he's unaware of any Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited employee who owns such a facility in the European island country. In a post on his X social media handle on Tuesday, Kyari challenged President of Dangote Group Aliko Dangote to publicly identify any NNPC personnel involved with a blending plant in Malta. Dangote, Africa's wealthiest man and owner of a $20 billion refinery in Lagos, had claimed over the weekend that certain NNPC staff and oil traders are operating a blending plant in Malta, which he argues is hindering local production of petroleum products. Regulatory authorities have also raised concerns about the quality of petroleum products produced at a refinery in the Lekki Free Trade Zone. And to unpack these about the Minimum Wage Act and also the CBN press briefing on the interest rate and also Dangote refinery saga, I'm joined by the head of Fixed Income and FX, and that's Oladipo Ajayi. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, it's my pleasure. Let me kick off by asking what your thoughts are, on the new national minimum wage now, passed now into law as 70,000 naira. Your thoughts?
Well, my initial expectation is that I was thinking that the federal government would be able to actually take a big leap to 100,000 naira. But when you also check the current recurrent expenditure of the government as well, that's one of the reasons why they actually maintain like a 100% increase. And I just feel that is one step towards the right direction. And the other thing also, the fact that the review, minimum wage review now has been changed to more like every 3 years compared to the initial every 5 years. So it also simply means that in the next 3 years, we can always come back to the table and also renegotiate based on the prevailing issues at that particular point in time.
Just to touch on something interesting you mentioned, you said your expectations were 100,000 naira as the new minimum wage. I mean, critics say this may further shore up inflation in Nigeria. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think that we'll have to actually battle with aggressive inflation from 100,000 naira because when you look at current inflationary pressure, it's more of a supply side than demand side. And it's not the fact that people's capacity or real income has increased. It's not that people are buying more than what they used to buy before, but because of the fact that the prices of what they used to buy has increased aggressively. So I don't think 100,000 would have created that huge inflationary pressure that anyone would have actually been perturbed about. I think it would have been the best thing that would have actually improved the standard of living of people. And also what that would have done is that it will also increase the capacity of people to actually consume, which in turn will actually help people that are actually working in the manufacturing sectors, and they will actually have reason to actually increase production, which will also help employment levels.
Okay, let's touch on the increase in monetary policy rate from 26.25% to 26.75%. What impacts do you foresee on businesses and also consumers in Nigeria?
Well, I'm not an advocate of increase in NPC, this current NPR rate. My view has been that the NPC will actually just discuss about the prevailing issue and actually give a poor guidance. But I'm actually surprised that we saw another 50 basis point rate hike. Currently, it has taken us to 26.75 now. And what it means to businesses is that in the days to come, they should be expecting letter from the banks actually advising them of the increase in monetary policy rate, and as a result, increase in their existing loans with the bank. And that has been the challenges. Now, most businesses actually borrowed funds from central bank around 34%, and imagine with another 50 basis point, meaning around 34.5 to about 35%. And this is actually not so good for businesses. I'm actually not surprised if people that are actually operate in the SMEs, MSMEs industry are actually complaining because the richest man in Africa also complain about this elevated rate level and the impact on businesses. So I don't think it's actually a very good one for business owners. And on the back of Central Bank, they actually mentioned that the view is to continue to rein in inflation. But at the same time, I also think that we also need to look at what will be the full impact. I would have expected them to allow us the full impact of the new policies and direction of the fiscal policy guys. We've seen the fiscal policy guy mentioning about giving tax holidays and also allowing importation of some food items so as to actually reduce food inflation. I would have expected them to allow us to seal the full impact of this, maybe wait till September before they can actually make a decisive decision. But there's nothing we can do. We just need to find a way to actually align with the new rates.
Okay, just to come in there, Mr. Ajayi, you touched on the impact of this increase in MPR, on SMEs and also MSMEs. Now, with liquidity ratio now pegged at 30%, how do you foresee this affecting lending activities and also overall economic growth in Nigeria?
Well, liquidity rate has always been at 30%, but the concern has always been the capacity of the banks to actually lend money. Because if you look at the corridors now, the corridors have been adjusted from plus 300 minus 100 to plus 500 minus 100. So what that simply means is that if a bank is short of liquidity and needs to actually access the standard lending facility window, which is the SLF window, they will have to borrow from central bank at 26.75 plus 5%, and that is already 31.75. So it simply means that if banks is borrowing from central bank at 31.75, what rate do you think they will actually lend money to their customers? If banks is borrowing at 31.75 from the central bank when they need maybe urgent liquidity gap measures to actually fund their liquidity gap, of course, it means that most of the time they would rather just stay out of that window and not extend any loans to anybody. Most time, the direction for most banks will not be actually just preserve the liquidity they have, and nobody wants to take risk with liquidity they have now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we are not seeing increase in the level of creating risk assets on the part of the bank. So I don't think this is very positive to SMEs and MSMEs in terms of actually getting loan from bank, except the federal government is now looking at a way to actually stand in the gap in that area, maybe actually partnering with banks and actually creating funds to actually extend to this segment of the market at a cheaper level.
All right, finally, let's talk about Dangote refinery. We've seen allegations, counter allegations in the course of this week from the regulatory, petroleum, officers accusing him of products being substandard. And now we have another, alleged, allegation. What are the implications, for instance, for Nigeria's economy if NNPC personnel are indeed involved in operating a blending plant in Malta, as alleged by Aliko Dangote?
I think the problem currently in the country is that when we don't do things right, that we give room for rent seeking. And this is a country that has 4 refineries and none is actually working. And it won't be so if at the end of the day it's true that there's some NNPC officials that actually have a refinery or a cracking or a melting plant somewhere in Malta. I think they need to, the government needs to find a way to actually bring them to book. It also means that all the while they have been the ones sabotaging the effort of the government to actually bring back or bring alive all the ailing refineries. So I think that the government needs to look at this issue to the end, and this is where the duty of EFCC comes in. I expect EFCC to come into issue and also investigate to the end and also carry the whole populace along on this issue. We need to sanitize every area of the economy so as to actually move forward as a nation. And I think that EFCC, if they are able to actually do their work very well, and they actually can come to the fore with the right or with the truth around this thing, this will help and also boost the image of the country in international markets. And on the part of that Dangote refinery also, I think mentioning that the fuel or the products are actually substandard, I don't expect that to hear something like that from a regulator. And I think it's something that you can actually start with the business owners around that. Because this is a company that's already looking at exporting to neighboring countries. So if you, the owner, is already saying that the product is actually substandard, so what do you expect to actually hear from people that you are expected to actually export your products? And don't also forget that Nigeria Lifeline is basically so much on this refinery, because what it would do is that it will help us to prevent the hemorrhaging reserve. It will help us to actually improve the FX liquidity in the country, and also help Naira to actually appreciate and stabilize at a great level.
And that's a fine place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your insight on the news. Head of Fixed Income and FX, Chapel High Denham Securities Limited, Oladipo Ajayi. Many thanks again for your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me here.